everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we're going to talk about choosing the right line for the right technique. So let's do this. Alright, so like I said in the intro, we're going to go discuss what line type I use for which technique. I am a very big technique specific person, so for me, I want to make sure I have the correct rod, the correct reel, and the correct line for every single technique that I'm using. In this video, you will probably be able to mix and match on different techniques with different line capacities, or I should say different line sizes. So if you don't want to take 15, 20, 30 rods with you, you only want to take 2 or 3 or 4, you can consolidate these down. But if you're like me and you're avid and you love technique specific stuff, then let's do this. The first kind of line I want to talk to is a line that I don't use a whole lot, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, and that is monofilament. This one specifically is a Vicious monofilament. It's a Vicious Ultimate, and this is an 8-pound test. Let's go over the characteristics of what monofilament does. So monofilament has a lot of stretch, and it's also buoyant, so it's going to float on top of the water column. The only time I really use monofilament is if I'm fishing a topwater. Here in Ohio, the biggest fish that we can usually catch are 5 or 6 pounders. Typically a 10-12 pound bag will win you tournaments here, so I don't do more than 8. Occasionally I'll throw a 10-pound test on there, but you won't see me throw anything higher than a 10-pound. Usually it's 8 or 10. The reason I like using monofilament as a topwater is 1, it floats, so that's going to help with your topwater action, but 2, when a fish does bite it, when you go to set the hook, the stretch in the line is actually going to give it just enough delay that you're not going to rip that bait out of the fish's mouth. When I switched to 100% monofilament, I've gotten a lot better hookups on my topwaters. Another thing you can use your monofilament for is jerkbaits and crankbaits. But let me preface that if you use monofilament for a jerkbait or you use it for a crankbait, just know it's not going to be as low in the water column as you might think. So if you're using a crankbait and the box says it dives 4 to 6 feet, if you're using a monofilament, it's probably only going to get to that 4 feet. You might get it to 5 feet, but you'll never hit 6 feet. You need something that sinks to get it down to that deeper depth. Also, if you're going to use monofilament on a moving bait like a crankbait or jerkbait or even a spinnerbait, you're going to want to use a faster action rod. Don't want to use one of those moderate glass rods. If you use a moderate glass rod, you know that you get a more parabolic bend to it, so it kind of bends more in the middle of the rod instead of at the tip of the rod. And what happens is that slower response when you go to hook set, you're going to get a slower hookup ratio, or you're going to get a slower hook set from the rod, and then you're going to get an even slower hookup set with the monofilament because of the stretch in the monofilament. So the number one rule is if you're fishing monofilament for a moving bait, always use a faster rod. If you're going to use a slower rod, you need to use a line that has less stretch in it. So let's talk about the next type of line that I use. This one is probably my second most used line. Again, I don't use it a whole lot. Right now I think I have 5 of my 20 setups have it on there, and that is braided fish line. So this specifically is the Vicious no fade braid. This is 40-pound test, and as you can see, it's still dark green, and I bought this one spool in, I believe it was 2019. It could have been 2018. It was whenever No Fade first came out. When I went to order it, they were all sold out except 40-pound. So I went with a 40-pound. I've been using 40 and also their 55-pound for my frogs and also flipping. Absolutely love this thing. I love this stuff. It doesn't fade at all, but you can use whatever braid you're happy with. I just prefer Vicious. So with braid, what you get with braid is it's a stiffer line, absolutely zero stretch, and again, it floats. So this is really good again for topwater frogs. I always fish frogs with straight braid, but I also like to use braid when I'm flipping heavy cover. So if I'm flipping something that's got a lot of vegetation or a lot of wood, I almost certainly will use a braid. 2 reasons is it's more abrasion resistance, but secondly, it can act like a mini saw under the water. So if you're fishing vegetation and you're trying to pull your bait through that vegetation, this line will actually work as a saw and actually cut down the vegetation or the weeds or whatnot as you're coming through. Same thing with wood. If you're fishing lumber, timber, anything like that, this can actually work as a saw and it'll keep you from getting hung up more. It'll help you from getting hung up than you would if you threw a traditional, say, fluorocarbon. One thing where braid actually works amazing is on your spinning line or your spinning reels. Every single one of my spinning reels has 10-pound braid on it. Again, it's a vicious, no fade, but they're high vis yellow. So when I'm using braid on a spinning reel, I like to fill up my entire spool with braid. And then when I'm ready to tie on a bait, I'll usually put a 2 to 3 foot leader of fluorocarbon on that braid. Reason being is I like to use a bright colored high vis line. It's bright yellow. With that bright yellow, the fish will see it if I just throw straight braid. So putting that fluorocarbon leader on there, it keeps my bait undetected and it allows me to get more bites. Another reason that I put braid on my spinning reels is it reduces line twists and line knots like no other. This is probably the best manageable line you can put on a reel. Since I've switched over to using 10-pound braid with a fluoro leader, I've never had to worry about any types of line twists or line knots. Braid is absolutely phenomenal when you're fishing heavy cover, but it's also really great on a spinning reel so that you get better line management and you're not going to ruin your day with knots. And lastly, my absolute do or die must-have fishing line is fluorocarbon. More specifically, the Vicious Pro Elite fluorocarbon. So when it comes to fluorocarbon, I actually use 3 sizes. I use a 10-pound, a 12-pound, and a 17-pound. And then let me get into each technique as to why I use them for each one. So starting with the smallest, which is 10-pound, all of my crankbaits sit on 10-pound fluorocarbon. Reason being is you get little to no stretch, so the delay in hook sets comes from the rod. 2, it's virtually invisible. It's one of the clearest, most invisible lines you can use in the water. 3, it's abrasion resistant. So if I'm fishing over timber, if I'm fishing bouncing it off rocks or ripraps, it's abrasion resistant. It's not going to shred like a monofilament. Now, every 5 to 10 casts, I always check my line. If there's any nicks or frays, I cut it and retie. It's not as abrasion resistant as braid is. The fact that it floats, it's clear, and it has some abrasion resistance to it makes it the best line. But now the cons of fluorocarbon is really stiff and has a lot of memory. And what I mean by that is when it comes off of your reel, it's going to still keep those loops even when it gets into the water. It takes a lot of casting and a lot of pulling to get the memory out so that it lays flat. I like using reel snot or any other type like the KVD line and lure conditioner, and I'll spray it on here once I get the line spooled on, I'll spray it on there. But also as I'm spooling the line, when I'm holding the line tight after my reel, when I'm reeling it in, I'll take a towel or a paper towel and I'll spray that line conditioner in the towel, wrap the towel around the line, and then reel it in off of the spool and then onto the reel. That way it gets rid of all the memory from being on the filler spool. And then once it's completely on my reel spool, then I just do a couple sprays of my line conditioner and I'm good to go. You're still going to get memory, but you're not going to get as much memory. Again, 10-pound test for any of my crankbaits. And that's crankbaits from the square bill all the way down to a deep diver. So now let's talk about 12-pound. This in my hand is actually 12-pound. This is my all-purpose do-everything line. I like using this on the reels if I'm going to throw something like a spinnerbait, chatterbait, swim jig, a football-headed jig, lipless crankbaits, flat-sided crankbaits, pretty much any other type of moving bait that doesn't have a bill on it. We'll just say that. A moving bait without a bill, I'll use a 12-pound. Reason being is usually if I'm fishing those types of baits, it's because I'm fishing it around some type of a cover. So I like the thicker line so that I can horse those fish out of that cover. And the thicker line has a little bit better abrasion resistance than your smaller line. And then the last poundage I use is 17-pound. And 17-pound I only use for one application. And that is specifically flipping and pitching. So I know I said earlier that I use braided line when I'm flipping and pitching, but I also use a 17-pound fluorocarbon, just straight fluorocarbon for flipping and pitching. If I can get away with just throwing fluorocarbon, that's what I'm going to throw. 17 pounds, I can get it through vegetation, I can get it through timber, I can get it through most rocks without any issues. It has almost the same characteristics as braid. 17 pounds is thick enough to help with the abrasions. It doesn't have the same sensitivity braid does, but I just prefer using straight fluorocarbon. That's one less knot that I have to worry about failing, because you never know when that main line to leader line knot may fail on you. You could be horsing in a 10-pound fish of a lifetime and your line or your knot broke. So if I can get away with just throwing straight fluoro, that's what I do. It just takes another variable out of what a misfortune that could happen. Now there's times when I'm fishing lakes, say Nettle Lake in Ohio, that's just completely covered with lily pads and completely covered with topwater vegetation, and by midsummer you'll have algae and everything coming up from the bottom of it. That's when I typically will throw a braid to fluoro leader. That way the braid can help me cut through some of that vegetation and not worry about the line cutting. I still like to use a 2-foot, maybe 3-foot leader, just so that that high vis or even the dark green isn't detected by the fish. There's that separation between this dark green or bright yellow object in the water and this that could be a crawl. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please drop a comment. Let me know what type of fishing line you use, and is it a mono, is it a braid, is it a fluorocarbon, what size or what pound line do you use, brain, give me everything. I want to know everything about the type of ways you fish. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not. It helps us grow and it helps us reach more people. And also don't forget to like the video. I'll catch you on the next one.